What's going on, people? Welcome back to the Talkin' TV podcast. I'm Dom. That's Chris, movie nerd, TV nerd. Wait a minute. Chris, I got the camera directions right on the first try.
You did.
First try. Oh, man, Chris. So remember how this past Friday you called me like right after I got out of work and was like, dude, I'm so excited. Are you excited? I'm like, yeah, dude, I'm excited. Well,
I did, yeah. And what was that for?
Oh, well, it was for our Karate Kid watch-along, the original 1984 Karate Kid that has spawned a legacy that I personally never expected for that little movie to have generated. But needless to say, I think I am like, I may not be showing it, but I'm like up to your level of like excitement this past Friday because this is a special episode.
Yeah, the first time. This whole year has been a year of firsts.
Absolutely.
Some good, some not so good.
Yeah.
But tonight I'm glad to share that we have a pretty awesome first time for this show. Something I've done quite a lot in another podcast, but I'm excited to do for the first time with you, Dom.
I mean, I'm not going to lie. This isn't tactically the first celebrity. I mean, my friend that worked on it, know this much is true, is kind of like, you know, our first official one. But this is like our first like official, like kind of like guest interview. So this is new territory for Talkin' TV.
This really is, and we have what I hope is going to be quite the show for you. We don't know where the conversation is going to take us. We are just so thrilled to sit down and pick this man's brain. We're so thankful he gave us his time. So, Dom, why don't we waste no more time and bring him in here? Who are we talking to today?
There are people, ladies and gentlemen, please help us give a warm welcome to the one, the only, Mr. Jeffery Bryan, the keyboardist for the band Survivor. Jeff, how you doing, man?
Nice to see you guys.
Yeah, definitely. Nice to meet you.
That's a hell of an intro.
Oh, thank you. Well, I
can feel the love already.
Yeah, I was about to say I would give no less to anybody else that I was having on. You know, like I said, this is a first for us. You were technically awesome. Like our first big name celebrity that we've had on this podcast.
Yeah, dude.
Oh, that's
this
nice
is gonna be this is gonna be a good one, dude. So first off, I just kind of want to know. You know, how are you? You said you're in Los Angeles, right? You're based out in LA?
Yeah, born and raised. I'm still here.
Cool. So, I mean, how have you guys been holding up with all the craziness of the corona? I have a couple friends in LA. They seem to be getting fed up with being locked in their houses and stuff. So, I mean, how you doing, man?
Yeah. Well, there's no doubt that I'm getting a little, crazy. But, we're not sick. And fortunately, we're not... We don't have it as bad as some other people can be having it. And so, we're fortunate from that perspective. But from music, it's terrible, man. We're not playing. And I'm not just in Survivor, I'm in other bands too, and they're not working. So, it's when people say, well, I'm not working, that's one thing. But when work is what you do as a life, you're not doing anything. It's really hard. So,
Yeah, man. Well, it's good to hear that you're keeping your head up a little bit. I mean, it seems like you have a beautiful studio there, so I'm sure you can get lost in that room for hours.
Yeah, and often do. Actually, my piano out there is where I end up spending so many hours. I mean, just play the piano, and it kind of it's kind of like a little time machine. These are all little time machines.
Yeah, I was about to say, I'm like, you got some interesting looking instruments back there. Like, I'm particularly interested in that keyboard guitar that you got hanging up back there. Yeah, it looks so good.
Awesome. I got my camera right too.
Nice, yes.
First time, Dom.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's kind of a running joke that we've had on this show, which is that like whenever I'm trying to point to somebody else, I always get the camera directions screwed up, and so that I made that like a running joke on the show. But I did get it for the first time, actually.
That's a Casio AZ1. It's actually from the 80s. It's why it's on that wall, because I have a Les Paul, 73 Les Paul, and a Casio AZ1. And I do use them, but I don't use them as often because, there's newer stuff that does more stuff and lightweight and whatnot. But that thing is actually the real deal. It's a vintage keyboard, so it's... I wouldn't want to replace it. That's for sure.
I was about to say, you just made me even more jealous than I already was of just somebody owning that. But yeah, so Jeff, obviously you've got, I would like to think, a very long and very detailed history as far as just like what you've done career-wise, both in music and in movies. But to kind of bring it to the topic immediately of today's episode. So this past weekend, Chris and I did a watch-along of Karate Kid, one of Chris's absolute favorite movies of all time, obviously in honor of Cobra Kai, just recently coming to Netflix and it being a tremendous success on there.
Yeah.
Like it's funny. It's kind of one of those things where I'm like, I saw the promo for it a couple years ago back when it was on YouTube, and I'm like, okay, this kind of looks like it could be interesting. But what would happen if this were on Netflix? And needless to say, what happened.
There it is.
But
yeah,
it's interesting because you actually starred and had a part in that movie.
Yeah, the original Karate Kid. Yeah, and I wasn't a background actor. I was an actual cast member. I mean, there was a bigger cast than what, unfortunately, people got introduced to. Oftentimes, when making movies, sometimes the scripts are longer than the format, and so things have to get cut. And I was in a group of guys, that we call Freddy's Gang, and Freddy from the movie, Israel Warby is his actual name, but Freddy, and there was myself and Frankie Avalon Jr., Tom Fridley, and Ken Daly, and the five of us were all friends with Daniel LaRusso when he came to Reseda, because we kind of lived in the building and we're kind of hanging out with him, and we went to school with him. And one day, Freddy introduces him to mentioned something about karate, and then the whole thing is like, oh, karate will kick this guy's ass. So we weren't very good friends, as it turned out.
Right.
But we had a lot more scenes and a lot more to do when we got originally cast in the film. And every day it was sort of like, okay, what am I not going to be doing today? It was one of those things.
Yeah,
but,
definitely.
Yeah, but I worked on the film. I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead. No, I was just wondering if it was one of those like.
I was saying I worked on the film for the whole time, so it originally was supposed to be a 2-week deal, and it got extended right at the beginning. So they obviously weren't sure, the producers and the director wasn't 100% sure how they wanted to tell the story at the beginning. But as time went on, they really whittled it down. I mean, there were a whole bunch of us that didn't get as much screen time as we thought we were going to get. Still, so nobody expected that movie to be what it was today.
Right.
What it is today,
Yeah.
Right. And the legacy it spawned, and the fandom, which stretches multi-generations. I mean, it seems like people, in our generation, when we did this watch along, we had about 60 people watching the movie along with us that were just as fired up about this movie in 2020 as I've ever seen anyone. And so it's pretty remarkable. But so let me ask you this then, because that kind of sparks some curiosity here. The script that you initially got when you went out for the part and read the part, it must have been way more beefy in regards to like the gang that you were in the movie and all that type of stuff. And was it just like one of those cutting room floor situations as the shoot went on, or what was kind of your experience with it all?
Well, it was more, we were supportive from the beginning. I'm not going to, tell you that we had these incredible deep parts, but the kinds of, the scenes they had, if you remember the first fight scene, when he ends up on the, gets his butt kicked for the first time, and you hear, you really pick fine friends to hang around with Freddy. That was an on-screen line that it was me, but it ended up being off screen. They chose to do it, and they just stayed on his face. But that whole day, there was tons of stuff. There was a scene with me and Freddie and a couple of other guys that were kind of egging him on to go talk to Allie, and so, I mean, there were more like normal things that, guys would be doing that weren't in a karate gang, kind of thing. And I think they were trying to normalize him as much as possible. They were trying to make him look like, hey, he's just a normal guy. He's, trying to fit in at a new school. And we were supposed to be normal dudes that, were not part of this karate thing. But honestly, you don't miss us, because they're, in retrospect, they made the right decision, because there's just no need to go into detail about what is assumed, So unfortunately, I'm in the movie. I worked on it the whole time, but there's just very little of me that you can see.
Yeah, definitely. That's actually really, really fascinating, because that's the one thing to me that still stands out about that movie after 36 years, right? Yeah, 84. Yeah, 36 years.
Oh, you don't have to say that. You could just say many years. I would be happy with that.
What can I say? I'm a sucker for being accurate with movie release dates. It's kind of a byproduct of me being in so many damn trivia leagues. But yeah, the thing that really kind of holds up to me, and especially that I've noticed in a couple of other particularly one other very iconic movie that John G. Avildsen directed, which is that it's got this really good sense of legitimacy to it. Like, you really feel like you don't feel like you're watching like movie characters with that movie. You feel like you're watching just like an actual real group of people about that. So yeah, so it's funny because again, again, I believe that like the only time that you're like actually like physically on present is that opening scene on the beach, right? But you said that you were around for like the whole production, so like yeah. So like walk us through that. Like obviously, like I'm assuming you talked to the man himself, John G. Avildsen, the director famously of the original Rocky and Rocky 5. So like I guess just kind of like walk us through that whole process, like what he was like as a director.
Since you brought up John Avildsen, of all the people that were on the set, with the exception of Pat Morita, John was probably the one that everyone was extremely in awe of. He was come on, Rocky 1,
exactly.
And a lot of people may not know this, but John was one of the co-inventors of the Steadicam. And in the 80s, well, that was the reason why Jay Weintraub, who produced the movie, he also produced Rocky, brought him in, because they wanted those fight scenes to be like unlike any other movie shot. They were trying to do kind of like Bruce Lee movies. They want those fight scenes to be just really spot on, and they wanted to use the technology of the day, which was the Steadicam, which of course now you can buy a Steadicam for like $200,
right?
But back then it was this huge apparatus that the cameraman would put on. I just remember it was amazing thing to see in action, and he could walk and run, and the thing would just stand, and these weren't little cameras either in those days. Right. These were big Panaflex or whatever they call it, huge cameras.
Yeah,
and
with the giant tanks of film on top of them, obviously.
Yeah, it was quite a sight to see, and so from that perspective, everyone knew who he was, and so he had a little bit of a, there was a little bit of intimidation factor there, maybe, But as far as being on the set, I got to work with him on the beach scenes. There was the if I remember correctly, there was a couple scenes in the high school, which was actually a junior high, but it was a huge junior high. The high school scenes, and then the tournament scenes at the end, and then the party scenes during the I want to say Halloween. I think it was Halloween. Yeah, the Halloween party.
Yeah, the Halloween when he dresses up as the shower.
Yeah, and there were more scenes. There were more scenes of us during a couple of those clusters of shoots, where Ralph would be talking to one of us about, hey, have you talked to Allie? Have you done this? Have you done that? And then it either didn't make the final cut, or we would get to our dressing room and it would be redacted. And so a lot of that movie, I sat on the sidelines, in case they needed me. And in fact, they were paying all of us, the 5 of us, that gang, pretty much to stay home and not take another job just in case. So it wasn't my first movie. It was my second feature film, and it was very different from the first one.
Yeah. Okay. So wait, what was your first feature?
Oh yeah. It was called Hot Moves. You can find it on YouTube, unfortunately.
I was about to say.
I starred in it. It was a starring role too.
Right there. But
and I was a main character in that movie, but that was a low budget, kind of like a Porky's.
Okay, all right.
Type of movie. It was Fast Times at Ridgemont High type of deal, where 4 guys were trying to get laid before their senior year.
Got it. So I was about to say, so basically American Pie, only swap out the before graduation to senior year.
It was American Pie without Eugene Levy.
Oh,
we sure could have used him.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So let me ask you this: you were born and raised in LA, or did you move there at a young age to pursue show business?
No, I was born in LA, and I never moved anywhere to pursue show business.
Okay. So that's pretty funny to me then. Did you feel sort of pressured growing up in that town to take the path that you chose? Did you come from a family of entertainers, or?
No. You have to understand, I wasn't trying to be an I was trying to be a performer, but I wasn't trying to be an actor. And acting had never really been part of my quote plan when I was 13 and 14 years old. I was I discovered music at a really early age. I think my mom used to like to sing, and she kind of, we discovered I could sing. I could carry a tune at a young age, and so I started loving it. And I wanted to be a scientist.
Wow.
I wanted to be an astronomer. I was really into that, and even at 13. But I found this real strong urge to, when I got up in front of people, it kind of brought me out of my shell a little bit. I kind of felt a little bit special, I could do something that other people not necessarily felt comfortable doing. And it empowered me. And so I just wanted to sing, and I learned how to sing. And then I said, well, if I'm going to keep singing, I got to sing my own songs. So I learned an instrument, I learned guitar, and then of course keyboards. And that was what I was doing. And I was in a show called Too Short for Primetime Players, which was performed at the Roxy on Sunset on Sundays for a matinee for kids. And their parents would come in, and they'd pay to have this variety show put on for their kids' birthdays. And it was kind of an interesting show. And I was in that show since I was 15 for a few years. And that show got a lot of attention, being at the Roxy, and the fact that it was just so unusual. There were a lot of actors in that, not just singers and dancers or whatever, but there were kid actors, Mark Price, and there's a whole bunch of people that were in that you might remember from TV and from the 80s. And there were just, young kids just trying to find something to do to further their careers. And as it would happen, it got a little bit of notoriety. And I think the news did a segment on us. And then the Merv Griffin Show came knocking. And the Merv Griffin Show was sort of like a Johnny Carson, The Tonight Show type of deal. And but of course, Merv Griffin was, if you look him up, if you guys are too young to know who he is, he was a major mogul, just as big as Johnny Carson. And so we got asked a couple of the kids, got asked to come on national TV and sing and do what you do in the show. So we did, and I did. And that was sort of my entrance into acting. Someone approached me and said, you look young for your age, and you've got a look or whatever. I'll get you an agent. And I'm like, but I don't act. Well, you do now, that kind of thing. So I was like, well, all right, I don't know. I mean, the thing is that when you're trying to do something, when you're just starting out, no matter what age you are, you don't say no to stuff because you don't know where it's going to lead. And so you're like, well, okay, it's not singing, it's not performing, but it's acting, and that's kind of similar. Yeah, okay, let's go with it. And so that's how I got into the movie business. I really wasn't I really didn't know much about acting. It wasn't like something I studied. Now, if you ask me about music, I had studied piano and guitar, and I could read and write music, and I could, sing and write, but I had things to fall back on. But as far as acting, I didn't really have any history with it. I was like, I don't know. All right, read these words. Okay.
Oh man, that's so fun. Oh no, go on.
Sorry, Dom. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I was just gonna say, I just think that's so funny that you say that, because I've done a couple of background extra gigs, recently before everything got shut down, and it's so funny because Chris was talking to me about that, and he was like, Dom, you could become an actor. I'm like, Chris, I do not want to become an actor. I'm just looking at this as a sort of extra way to supplement income, and these just happen to be available, and it just happens to be a good way for me to get on set.
Yeah.
So I just, again, it's a thing that I've kind of been noticing, because I've been listening to a lot of interviews recently about people getting their starts in the entertainment business, and for what it sounds like a lot of people, I'm not gonna say it happened to them by accident, but it almost seems like, it was never the intended goal for them to become an actor. So I just find that really interesting that you say that.
Yeah, that may be true for many people. I don't know. I mean, I really don't differentiate, music and acting as much now as I did then.
Yeah.
Then it felt like a complete, this doesn't have any, but what I do as a musician is very similar to an actor in that we're just communicating, we're just having a conversation, and just the medium is different.
Right.
Yeah,
it's funny that you say that, because I know that that's a big thing, obviously, with the difference between today and specifically with the 80s, where back in the 80s and 90s, it was very rare that just specifically with acting, if we're talking with movies and TV and stuff, it's the idea is if you did movies, you did movies. And if you did TV, you did TV. But now it's obviously with streaming, just with how technology is advanced and everything, there seems to be crossovers galore. So
it's not even the same universe we're in anymore. The world is, just in 20 years, is unbelievably different.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm fortunate in the sense that I've seen how it was done in the analog days, and I know how it's done in the digital days. So I kind of got the best of both worlds. I'm a techno geek. I get technology. I'm really good at it. I always have been, but I also know where all the bodies were buried from how it all started. So I've got sort of I got a good handle on it, I think, whereas some of the younger people today don't know why things are the way they are or why they use the instruments they use, hypothetically. They just know how to use them.
Right.
And so I kind of come from, the time before and now. So I don't know. I think I got a good handle on it.
Yeah,
definitely
right.
gives
Well,
you
I
a
mean,
leg up.
Nowadays, if you want a saxophone, well, you just go and download a saxophone patch off whatever plug-in company of your choosing is, and you're playing a saxophone on your MIDI keyboard or a drum set.
I get your point, and I totally get it with the spirit of what you're saying. But yeah, you need a sax player.
Oh, you definitely need a sax player, and that's kind of why I bring that up. How do you, as someone who, it seems to be very multifaceted, and you were talking to us a little bit before we went live here about, you also record your own music in your studio. I mean, do you feel that when you listen to a modern record, as compared to, like, let's just, for example, I was just listening on my way over to Billy Joel's The Stranger, right? And I mean, I don't know, like, maybe my ear's not trained enough, or maybe I'm just so clinging to what I wish I had, like the classic analog studio, that I just get upset with modern music. But what's your take on how that's all progressed from, like, like a techno nerd standpoint?
Sure. Well, not to get too far off the subject, because I know we want to talk about Karate Kid a little bit, but I love this. I love where this is going, because I do have an opinion about it. The thing about music is we have the ability now to create more art than ever in human history. I mean, we've got millions and millions of people churning out artwork. I don't know if any of it's good or not, but there it is, right? The thing is back 30 years ago, 40 years ago, or whatever, in order to get something to a point where you could record it, you had to have a skill to get it recorded. And, people needed to be able to play an instrument proficiently enough so that they could get it recorded, because, you couldn't just cut and paste it. You couldn't just, auto correct it. You had to play it over. And so that could be very expensive and very time consuming if you didn't know your instrument. So there was more focus on skill than perhaps even art, where now it's all about, fluffy stuff. I feel it, I'm going to write it. Okay, great. But the thing is, back then it was like, I had a skill I could communicate that maybe another person didn't have as much. And that made it valuable. And so I think maybe a lot of times, and I'm not putting down today's music, there are an enormous amount of great musicians that are, that are of this era, that are creating, amazing records. But you also have a lot of really crappy records. And, so the amount of crappy records that you have is far greater than the amount of crappy records that you may have had 30 years ago, because it was not as possible. Nobody could make a record in their bedroom, and because of that, you're going to get a large variety of stuff, and you have to wade through. And I think it does two things, and I'll shut up after this. One, it gives, you get a lot of material, but it causes the listener, you and me, it forces us to, the responsibility is now on us to decide what is good, rather than, the key holders or the what I mean? But the difference is that you can guarantee that 30, 40 years ago, the people that were in charge of what got released, those people could freaking play. You know what I mean? Because there just wasn't, you weren't going to get anywhere if you weren't good. Now, I'm not saying you don't have to be good, but the bar has changed. It's not quite the same. And so people, like listeners, we decide now what is going to be acceptable. And, if you really have a discerning sense of what you like, you got to search for it. It's your responsibility now. So it's a little different. If you just listen to whatever they're giving you, you'll probably find yourself bored after a while.
Jeff,
totally.
Jeff,
I hope I don't
no
sound like
idea.
get off my lawn guy, but
Jeff,
you know what I mean.
You have no idea how happy you just made me with that whole statement right there. Because
and what I will say is, we'll get way more into the music side on my music show coming up later on this week. But I just felt like, so we'll definitely tap into that. But I totally, as a musician myself, I hear what you're saying. That makes so much sense. That's
Yeah,
a very interesting perspective. But yeah, Dom, sorry, go ahead.
Well,
man.
no, I was just going to say the only thing I wanted to add to that is the fact that I feel like that what you just said, like verbatim, applies exactly to I feel like what Chris and I have been trying to say about just movies and TV shows in general. Specifically, a couple weeks ago, we had actually, I believe it was actually more like 2 months ago now, time with the virus and everything. We had an episode discussing Netflix and kind of what we both liked and didn't like about it. And pretty much everything that you just said about the music industry basically applies like beat for beat to what we were trying to say about Netflix,
Because
which is the
art.
idea that, there's so much content now to choose from. And the fact is that because it's so easy and because so many people can now do it, that the bar for quality has become lowered. And you're absolutely right. Like you basically just said, like everything we were saying on that episode, which is that the Netflix algorithm gives to people what it is that they search for. So it is now up to the consumer in order to determine what they want their bar of quality to be. And that can either be a great thing or it could be a terrible thing.
Well, I think we're seeing the good and bad of it now. You know, I mean, you can point to situations now where being a consumer-based, where trends are happening because consumers are looking for it. You know, it's sort of like the tail wagging the dog kind of thing. You know, it's like, well, which is right? You know, and I think it's not right, and neither is the other way to be pandered to or told what to listen to. There's somewhere in between, and we haven't discovered it yet as a people. We're still evolving in that sense, and this technology is going to change things continually as we continue to evolve with it, and hopefully, I think it'll snap back a little. I think people will get tired of the same humdrum stuff that they can make on their own. I mean, the whole idea for me about entertaining people or communicating something to people is that you're giving them something they haven't heard before, or maybe something they haven't heard in a particular way before, something that's unique to you as a performer that you're sharing with them. That can't be replicated. You know, and so hopefully people will get more back to that and understand that it starts in here and in here. You know, it's not out there, or in a computer somewhere. You know,
exactly. It's funny you said, "Oh, and then I'll shut up." I'm like, "No, please keep talking. You're saying everything that we've been trying to say."
I could talk for hours
pretty
about
much
this
since we started this podcast.
It's such a fascinating subject, and I think it affects everybody and everything, not just artwork.
Absolutely. It's so funny because literally it's like Chris and I have been having this conversation since we started this podcast with like, what is it that we want this thing to be about? And like, it's so funny because like I've had conversations and arguments with my family. They're like, what? Why are you trying to like discuss movies and TV and music analytically? Nobody cares about that. I'm like, yeah, they do. It's like, because you wouldn't listen or watch this stuff if you couldn't get anything out of it.
Isn't it sort of kind of a TV nerd, movie nerd? Isn't it really more of a metaphor or should I say sort of like a temperature of where people are in terms of, you know, what they're buying as real and not real, and good and not bad, and good or not good, you know?
Yeah, it's kind of like distinguishes like kind of the levels of our perception of reality in a way.
It does. I mean, because this is what we do as people, as human beings. We communicate. That's all we got.
Yeah, and stories are like one of the best ways that we have of communicating, like going all the way back. I referenced this a number of times with like ancient Greeks. Yeah, with the ancient, like the stories. And like it was the idea that like it wasn't necessarily that it was like trying to be entertaining. Back then it was more so just like kind of like these life lessons, these moral truths that like still to this day are applicable.
Exactly. I mean, there's this idea, I'm sure, that some people think that technology is some magic button that they press and suddenly they're now Paul McCartney or something. I don't know.
That would be nice.
But I mean, the point is that, you know, eventually people will come to again and realize, shit, I got to do the work. I got to figure out what it is. It's not even work so much. It's just understanding that, you know, the purpose of why you're creating something is so that you're going to express something to somebody that maybe might change their mind or might give them a new insight to something or show them something about yourself that's vulnerable that they might recognize. The point is those are not things that a computer can do. They're just things that you can put in a computer to, you know, modify your message, but they're not the message.
Exactly.
So
yeah, it's so funny because like, but I know certain people who are like, oh, the algorithm of everything is controlling our lives. I'm like, yeah, but the algorithm still has to be designed by people. It's like it hasn't gotten to that level. Even if it did, it wouldn't be able to like compute information that to a level that the human brain can. Like there still to me is no kind of like equitable instrument as to the human brain, at least not yet, not that I've seen.
That's a whole nother subject.
Yeah, definitely.
we need Elon Musk for that one.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Oh man, would that be a guest?
We would have to get him in here, but what I'm kind of getting from this is, let's use Cobra Kai as an example, right? So Stranger Things was shot on super high quality cameras. Cobra Kai was not. But I would say equally each have garnered a huge level of fandom. And while Stranger Things is more produced, it has more bells and whistles. You can tell that there was more time put into the lighting, into the set design, into the color grading. It just looks more like an art tour style film. It's slicker. Cobra Kai has that human connection that no algorithm can feed or not feed. It connects on such a strong level.
I'll go a step further. Cobra Kai is also not very PC either.
Not at all.
In how they talk and how they how they approach these bullying situations and other things. And I love that. I hope that because of them going to Netflix, that they don't suddenly become, appeasing,
watered down.
Watered down. That's a good way of putting it. And I think that is all part of what makes the show, what I think what people like about it, especially. You don't get to see that very often.
Right. Yeah, it was interesting because the whole thing is the show kind of, but the whole kind of reason for why I wasn't necessarily interested in watching the show in the first place is because I saw the trailers for the first season. And I'm like, okay, great, more Karate Kid nostalgia. I'm like, just go watch the movies then if you want to just be reminded. But the thing that I noticed immediately when I started watching the show, and we said this on our Cobra Kai episode, is the fact that I'm like, no, this show actually seems to be wanting to say something, to communicate something to its audience. It wants to communicate the ideas of kind of like bullying, whether it's generational or not, kind of the idea of like the unintentional spreading of toxic masculinity and like kind of these unintentional terms where the idea is that because Johnny is now training these kind of like, basically for lack of a better word, the nerds of the crew. But now they're like, not only are they becoming the bullies, but they're becoming like almost like this new form of bully, It's like the show has a lot more layers than I originally gave it credit for.
Yeah, well, a lot more layers than anyone expected. But do you remember a few years back, and it's still, I'm sure you do, remember this, is that there was that myth that was perpetrated by somewhere on YouTube about whether or not Johnny was actually the good guy.
Yes, I do. In fact, I think that one's still going. I think that one's still going around today.
I think that debate. Yeah, I was
about to say that's not true. That's still fresh and relevant today.
Okay, so that's still fresh. But here's the deal. Well, I know, but they introduced that idea was maybe 15 years ago or something.
Okay.
It's been around.
Okay.
A long time.
I get it.
It's been sort of like a kind of like a myth or some type of story that people were throwing around on the internet.
Yeah, I think they made a joke about it. That was one of like the longest running jokes in How I Met Your Mother was that Barney was actually a fan of Johnny over.
And people would have discussion forums over it. I mean, seriously, but they did. What's interesting about that, though, is that what I think is so unique about where they're going with this is that it's, life is not black and white. Life's got a lot of gray areas. Life is very messy. There is no yeses or nos. There's no right or left. It's very subjective. And so, I love the fact that Johnny's character, they're getting an opportunity to see why he was such an asshole, at that age. And then maybe that might give people a sense that there's more depth to this guy. And when you learn more about people, you suddenly see them differently. Even if you think they're bad people to begin with, you have a different kind of attitude about them. And I think that because of that and because of those, and it's no different for Daniel's character either. You're seeing that this guy might not have gotten all of the, Miyagi Dojo training he should have. It didn't quite sink in because, he's a car salesman. He's like, quick to judge and all this stuff. And so you're starting to see them flip a little bit, but that's life. And I think people are hungry for stuff that is, that forces you to think a little bit more than just go, okay, he's a bad guy. That's Darth Vader. He's a good guy. There's Luke. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's so funny. Again, it's pretty much everything that I got from the show is I'm like, wow, the show is actually a lot deeper than I was willing to give it credit for. And it's funny too, because you, again, with kind of Johnny and Daniel's respective journeys, you see that as they continue to bring back the older characters, first with Kreese with this past season, and now obviously they were hinting pretty heavily that they're going to be bringing back Elizabeth Shue for the next season. Potentially a few other characters down the road. But yeah, it's so funny because to me, going back, I remember one of the things to me that I'm not going to say I hated, but one of the things that I wasn't the biggest fan of with the original Karate Kid is kind of how black and white the struggle was. Now, granted, obviously that was like for
they
the
had
movie
90 minutes.
Right, for the storytelling of the time, right? But now, like, the thing that I loved is that it is showing it's like, is Johnny a good guy or a bad guy? Is Daniel a good guy or a bad guy?
I'm a huge fan of the Frank Herbert movie books, Dune.
Yeah, Dune.
And I think David Lynch's version was amazing for what it was, especially since Sting was in it. So
obviously, I mean, Toto doing the score, doing the soundtrack, like, come on.
But I read all the books back then, and I knew there was no way they were going to make a 90-minute movie or a 2-hour movie out of 400 hours of reading,
something like that. Just in that first book alone, like that book is actually funny. I'm actually reading it right now.
Story.
So
the intricacies and the subtleties, you just can't get it in 90 minutes. And you know what? The Karate Kid was not designed to be a series. It was really designed to be sort of a kids martial arts movie based on Rocky.
Right.
That was kind of the whole thing about it. But because of the depth that they're able to bring to the characters that they could bring if they had more time, Cobra Kai I think the producers did the right thing by opting for a series rather than another movie.
Yeah, I think that not only was the smartest choice. Yeah, not only was that the smartest choice that the creators could have taken, but I think it was like, it's just obviously like the right direction to me, because I'm seeing that again, like TV or streaming just in general, because streaming seems to become like this whole new beast in and of itself, seems to be taking the risks and going in the story directions that now like a lot of movies just seem to be scared of it. Oh man, that Dune, they just made me want to like go and nerd out with you about Dune for like the next hour and a half, because oh man, I hope you're looking forward to that Denis Villeneuve movie as much as I am. But
actually one of my favorite books. I wouldn't say it's my favorite movie. I'm I'm really curious about with this new one. I mean,
the one thing that I do know with this new one that they're going to do is it's not going to be the whole book. They're splitting it into multiple movies. And as for the David Lynch one, again, like I don't hate that movie at all either, but I will say it does feel like there's a solid, like just half hour, just specifically for what they did. Feels like there's a solid half hour missing from that movie. But
let me just it's interesting hearing you speak about Cobra Kai, and when I'm glad we kind of dipped into music a little bit there, because you brought up an interesting point about analog versus digital. And so you kind of get that when you look at Johnny and Miguel, right? So Johnny is like telling him, he's like, what's that? What's Guns N' Roses? He asks him. Miguel asks Johnny, and he's like, all right, here's your homework. Go look up these 80 hair metal bands and get into that kind of music. And I also think the show serves an important place in the sense that, like, I'm a musician, and I know that my musician friends, some of them too, unfortunately, most of them don't really know, like, a Paul McCartney, who you brought up, or like I'm wearing a Scorpions t-shirt, right? And that's not just because it's cool to wear these classic rock shirts now. I've had this shirt for a long time. I've always felt it was important to have a base in any art form of the classics. Like Dom he's a huge movie buff, bigger than I could ever be. And I'm telling you, this guy knows his 1970s, his 1960s, like it's no one's business. He also knows his modern day stuff. But like, as someone who's kind of like, grown up in the entertainment industry in a sense, do you feel that there is sort of, when you speak to like younger creators, younger art?
Oh man, I was hoping to avoid.
So how do you think that's affecting modern creation?
Repeat the question, Chris.
Yeah, I'm just curious, like, StreamYard. I'm just curious as to, like, when you speak to younger creators, right? Like maybe people like us, but if you're just like working a show or there's like a younger opener and music comes up, of course. Do you find that that dissonance between analog and digital, whereas like there's a lack of classics and a knowledge and a base of the classics going forward? Do you find that's present? Or do you think that there is still hope? And because I feel like, look, I have a bunch of like 16-year-olds in my job, and they're always on Snapchat, they're always on their phones, and I can't talk to them about a 2000s film, let alone a 1960s film. You know what I mean?
Well, it's been my experience, and since you brought that up, it's a good with regard to Survivor. The lead singer of Survivor is 26, so his name's Cameron Barton. He's a phenomenal singer. He sounds very close to Jimmy Jameson, who he replaced.
Wow.
So I this is a good question because I can directly answer it. And I do find that for me, people that understand artwork or just have a natural tendency toward it, they're kind of already kind of connected to something organic to begin with. So there isn't this huge divide. There may be references that are not the same. There may be things that, names and places and things like that aren't lining up exactly, but where it comes from is still the same place as if it was 30 years ago and I was looking for it, or whatever. So I find that the ones that are more talented or the ones that have explored that a little bit, the divide's a lot less. There's even though he's 26, and I'm 20 years older than him, there's not, when we talk about music, there isn't this huge weirdness there. There is with other things, we're 20 years apart, so definitely, and there should be. But with music, or I should say whatever art form that it is that we're doing, if it were, acting, I'm sure there's, people that take the time, not so much to learn history, but they're just sort of already kind of balanced that way, because that's part of creating, is pulling some organic stuff up. And so the ones that are just kind of like this, that aren't looking over here or over there, they're probably not growing either, like they should be. And so they're going to be one-dimensional or less dimensional, and yeah, it can be a problem, I suppose. But like I said, I think the ones that are not like this, that are kind of more like this, they're the ones, that are going to be working. They're the ones that are going to kind of rise to the top, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't know if that answers your question, but I don't think it matters what year it is, if it's 1950 or 2050. You know what I mean? I mean, artwork is artwork. Communicating is communicating. Music is music. And, the earth, the planet is still the planet. It's still got dirt on it. It's still a rock that's flying through the universe. So, I mean, we're not like, just because something's digital or whatever, there's still an organic base for it. And you can find it. It's just the references might be a little off.
Yeah, I guess my brain goes there because, we've speaking a lot on this show about how we're such an algorithm controlled, consumer based. And back in the day, it was all about the record label. You needed the record label to sign your band, to get you the tours, to get you the agent. Yeah. But now you have artists like, Chance the Rapper, who just by, persistency and hard work kind of were able to do it themselves and build this empire themselves. And so it just kind of, my brain was just sort of like wondering, from someone who's sort of been there in the analog days to now, because I feel like with the pace as well, the pace of consumption, the pace of consumerism, it's always here today, gone tomorrow. Stranger Things is hot for a month when it comes out, and then it's dead.
The pace of consumption is worrisome, I think. I think that what's really popular today isn't tomorrow. It's too quick. I don't think it's and because people know that that's a possibility, their artwork is shallower, because they know that no one's going to scratch more than a few seconds of it. So let's just, we got to put everything up front. And I think that causes a problem. I mean, there is something to be said about attention spans, and that I don't think is a good thing. I don't think that the internet has helped us in that sense. That's why with Cobra Kai, the fact that they made a series out of it, people are going to have to wait till the next season to find out if Allie's coming back, or if this is going to happen or that's going to happen, is kind of a pretty cool thing to see happen in this digital age where, you can't binge watch it right now. You got to wait. Of course, when it comes on, you can, but whatever. But the point is that the point with, oh, sorry, Dom, what? Were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to say I think that's so funny that you say that, because what we've been talking about recently is how you've been seeing this with a couple different shows like The Boys on Amazon. It's going to be happening upcoming with Fargo when that comes back on FX and Hulu, and then with The Mandalorian when that comes back, how Those shows are doing it like HBO, which still does it, which is where you gotta wait week to week for each episode. And to me, just talking about television, to me, that's what adds so much to the television experience, is that kind of waiting week to week, as Chris says,
anticipation,
like, getting the conversation by the water,
builds
up the anticipation.
It's built,
exactly.
It's kind of built into the DNA of that form, of that media, and it's necessary. And so I just wanted to make a comment about the fact that you brought up, which was that, there's a very short attention span, and that's not healthy. And it is an unfortunate, that's one of the side effects of this digital medium and age that we're in, that needs to be corrected, I think. I mean, people need to chill out a little bit and kind of get into their music, sit down and listen to it. I mean, I know this can totally sound like an old guy, and I'm not an old guy, but this is going to sound like one. I used to love, and it wasn't that long ago, you can still do it. Go buy a vinyl record and put it on a turntable, and don't put anything else on. Just listen to the damn record without any visuals. Close your eyes if you have to. I don't know. The point is that it takes on a whole different world. It's a different experience. And music, and I get pretty passionate about this one fact, is that music has become what you do when other things are going on now. It's become background music, which is really kind of pissed me off. Music was an event. A new record would come out, and you would stand in line, you'd buy the record, you'd go home, you'd put it on, you'd spend your whole, week's worth of money to pay for it. And you'd put it on a record, you'd open see the pictures, you'd look at the lyrics. You'd wondered what these guys were really like. You didn't always know if they had videos or whatever they were. The point is that you could create this whole mystique about them in your mind, and that was a whole different kind of entertainment. And I wish we would get back to a little bit of that. I get it. There's a lot out there, and it's hard. You don't want to just consume everything you see. You're not going to benefit from that. But I don't know how we get back to it, but it would be nice to see people slow down a little bit and just chill out with something they like.
Chris, can we make this guy like our official spokesperson? Seriously, because literally, you're basically saying like everything that we have literally been trying to say on this podcast since day one. I could not be more exact with that than I am. I'm literally the same way when it comes to movies, where it's I'm when I sit down and I'm really watch a movie. I'm not talking as bad, because unfortunately I am a part of this generation. I do fall victim to that. But my whole thing that destroys me is that people will say, "Oh, I just put on the show as background noise." It's but that completely defeats the entire purpose of what it is serving. The whole thing is when I watch a movie, I want to sit down and I want to watch it completely interrupted, not doing work, not doing anything, and I want to get that full visual experience. I just imagine I just rewatched a couple of months ago. I rewatched Blade Runner 2049, which is a movie that I wasn't the biggest fan of the first time I saw it, but then the second time I saw it, I got a completely different experience, right? But I'm could you imagine if when the original Blade Runner, which is one of my co-hosts' favorite movies of all time, came out, if people, it's unbelievable, that movie. But is that if people have the ability to be on their phones and not pay attention, if that movie would have accomplished half of what it did, and if that movie would have been you just take any other movie just from that year alone, 82 is ridiculous when it comes to movies. You talking, that's the summer of E.T., Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan, Poltergeist, friggin' The Thing, which to me is my favorite horror movie ever. It's it completely defeats the entire purpose of that art form and what it's serving to accomplish.
Yeah, but how do you communicate that to people? I mean, people are developing habits based on, what's going on with the internet, and how they consume now is different. I think if people would, be taught maybe critical thinking at an earlier age, and just sort of relax a little bit and don't get on the computers so much.
Yeah,
maybe your opinion would have more, would be defined differently, because you'd actually be discovering things that are real.
Exactly.
I don't mean to get way off, but I mean, I totally agree with you. It's just people are just don't have the attention spans they used to. I don't know where they're all in a hurry for. I don't know what the
exactly.
rush is.
No, it's so funny. That's literally a quote that we put on our Instagram page last year, which is that it was a direct quote from another guest that we had on the podcast, was that people don't have the attention span to last more than a few minutes. They're constantly just looking for okay, what's next, which is what's caused the modern day art form to like devolve into like this just series of like just throwing stuff at you in order to try and like get your attention span. And to me, it really is much more so to its detriment than anything else.
I agree. I think he who dies with the biggest hard drive is the winner, I suppose. I don't know.
Yeah.
How many terabytes can I fill up?
Right.
I guess. I don't know what the goal is, but that's slow down a bit,
Yeah.
So
maybe that comes with age, but I don't know.
As we sort of starts around the turn here and make our way towards the end of this episode, I mean, what would you, because a lot of our audience is film school kids or people who still want to like create one day, and we observe and we study film each week because we love it, but we don't just want to be commentators. If we can help it, we'd like to be creators one day. And so I'm kind of curious, like, what is your take as, again, someone who has like the analog and a good grasp on the analog and the digital perspective? Like, what would be sort of like your wisdom to creators, especially, I mean, given 2020 has been an insane year, I'd say, for anyone of any age, like to young creators, man, what would you have to say to them right now?
I would say the most important tool that you have is yourself. You're not going to find it out there or online. I mean, you might be inspired by what you see, and I hope you should be. And emulation, to copy something is a great compliment, and it's also not to be taken lightly. I mean, that there's a reason why so much great art sounds like other things. But in order for you to find out what it is that you have, we all are born with something, that is unique to us, whatever that is. You need to take the time to find it. I would think the most important thing any artist can do, whatever medium they are in, is just to be alone a little bit, pull back from the riffraff, pull back from all of the noise that's online, and just sit down. If it's a piano, play the piano and don't have a goal. Just play, just relax, let things kind of formulate, and don't be worried so much if there isn't like, oh, I haven't finished this, I have to sit down with a goal. Not necessarily. Sometimes it's just self-discovery. That's the goal, to do nothing. I think that we live in an age where because the technology can speed up these processes so fast that we think everything has to be done quickly and fast. And the truth is that nothing comes to you. Nothing even remotely useful comes quick. These things are usually things that have to kind of percolate a little bit, and you have to learn a little bit about yourself. So I guess just to put it simply, don't be afraid don't be afraid of yourself. Just don't be afraid to be alone. Don't be afraid to just take some time and stay and not be influenced by all that you see.
Wow. Again, profound things right here. Again, like I feel like not to take everything you just said and turn it into a complete joke, but I mean, look at me. I've been alone for the better part of my life, and I have this podcast where I'm interviewing a world class who should be a world class like TED Talks. Seriously, have you ever considered doing TED Talks? I'm serious. I'm dead serious. You guys are laughing.
Right.
I'm absolutely dead serious about that.
You're not wrong.
Well, that's a thought, I guess. But I mean, I've just lived it, man. I've been there. I know how frustrating it is not to be heard. I know how frustrating it is to make plans and then have them all destroyed, because of whatever. I mean, this is not screw the business. Life is not easy. I mean, you grow up and you think I want A, B, and C, but you learn that you don't even have the right language. You don't even know what A, B, and C is yet. And so what happens is you have to kind of take it in stride a little bit and understand that the world is really big. The universe has got a lot of info in it, and there's no way you're going to parse it all in 20 years or whatever it is that you're doing it. So you have to kind of sit back and go, well, I know what I see on the TV or the internet or YouTube or whatever I'm watching. And I see these people I see the same 5 artists collecting awards all the time. It's a little annoying, but you have to understand that's just the business. And these people are in the business for the business. But if you are true to what it is that you do, you can't be affected too badly by what you're not doing. You know what I mean? You can only, it's easy to internalize things. It's easy to be upset and not feel like you're getting your due, if you will. But life is not easy to understand. And so maybe the best thing to do is just to be happy with where you are and try to move that along. And so for me, I've seen it from both sides. I've had some really great things happen. I've had a lot of things that just didn't come to fruition, that just didn't happen. And I scratch my head all the time going, well, that could have been me, or that should have been this, or that could have been that way. But at the end of the day, I don't take that to bed with me. You know what I mean? I don't like ruminate over that so much, because at the end, I mean, I got me. And I know what I'm capable of, or at least I think I know what I'm capable of, and I've learned to accept that I'm bigger than maybe everyone else. You know what I mean? I'm not just what the media portrays it to be. There's more to you, and you have to insulate yourself a little bit. Yeah, it takes definitely a little bit of self-esteem and sometimes it takes falling down a little bit to build that kind of confidence up.
Yeah, roll with the punches, as they say.
Yeah. Well, look, Jeff, I literally listen to you speak like all night, like literally, like that's just kind of thank you for being here, just in general. Like you're awesome. So I guess the last thing that I want to ask you before we get going is obviously we talked a lot about kind of everything. We talked about Karate Kid, we talked about art, we talked about music, we talked about Dune a little bit, which I thought was pretty freaking awesome. So I guess my last question for you is only because I feel like we've talked about this a little bit, so I feel like we could ask you this. You're our first technical celebrity guest, so we can say that. What's your favorite movie of all time?
Favorite movie is either A Hunt for Red October or Blade Runner.
Nice.
Both great choices. Great freaking choices. Yeah.
Well, I'm a big
real quick. Now here's
first of all, and so I love, and I'm a Harrison Ford fan. So
right, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So now I want you to take a guess. Like I said, I'm playing this little game now. I'm going to introduce this segment. I'm going to have you guess what mine and my co-host's favorite movies of all time are. It's different choices, too. So you got to search from the far periphery of movies to pick from.
Well, you told me it was Blade Runner, right? For Chris.
It's one of his. It's not necessarily his, though.
It's top 3, though. So
it's up there. I would say, well, if maybe 2001. I mean, are we talking science fiction movies or of all time?
No, just general. Just general.
Time. We don't need
Godfather?
Close.
That's mine. That's mine.
Dom's. We got Dom's. Very close. Right. Same wheelhouse for me.
Same wheelhouse.
Give you a hint there.
Okay. Goodfellas.
100%.
Got it. This guy. This guy's good.
Yeah. One of my old bands, we have a song where we start off with that Joe Pesci, "You Think I'm Funny," and then we kick into some like sort of ska reggae type thing. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, man. But Jeff, dude, before we let you go, I would love for you to let the listeners know where they can find you and what's next in your journey.
Sure. The best place to get me is on my website because it's got all my social media links and stuff. It's jeffreybryanmusic.com, spelled JEFFREYBRYAN music.com. And you can reach me there if you want to say hello or you want to listen to some of my videos or listen to some music. It's all there.
Cool. Yeah, and the links will be in the description as well. And what's next? I mean, I know 2020 has sort of landlocked everyone, but like, where's your head at before we let you go going into,
Well, I mean, I've got some gigs coming up, believe it or not. Not with Survivor, unfortunately. It seems like the larger the national acts are going to take longer to get going because you can imagine there's more people involved. There's a crew and there's things. So I can tell you for sure that Survivor and Journey and REO Speedwagon and Loverboy, all the bands that we have toured with, they're done for the year. They're not going to happen this year. Maybe next year, but they say next year, but we don't know. So certainly Survivor is something I'm still doing. I'm hoping that it'll be shorter than later. But I have another band that I'm playing with just in a couple weeks, sort of a labor of love. It's called the K-Tel All-Stars. And you guys would love this, especially Dom probably. Well, maybe, I don't know. You guys probably both like it. Remember the K-Tel records from the 70s? The K-Tel, look up K-Tel, K-T-E-L. And there used to be this company called K-Tel Records that used to buy the licenses for all the biggest songs, and they would put compilation records together, and they're like, collector's items now. Right. There's always vinyl, 22, the greatest hits, K-Tel, Anyway, so I have a band that actually reproduces those songs from that era, all AM radio from 1970, 1979. I do a lot of singing. Everybody sings in the band. It's a great band, really good band.
Wow.
And so they're a lot of fun. So I'm playing with them. And the you want to check them out. It's the KTEL, KTEL All Stars with an S, no spaces or dashes or anything. .com, the KTELAllstars.com, and that's another band. So
awesome, man. And once again, guys, you can find everything that Jeff does on jeffreybryan.com. The link will be in the description of this video.
Jeffery Bryan Music.
jeffreybryanmusic.com. And so we'll put that in our Instagram stories and all that stuff, guys. So don't worry about finding it. We'll definitely get the word out to there for them. Jeff, dude, this was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to chat with us, man.
My pleasure. This hour went by like really fast.
Now you know our struggle whenever we do our main shows. We're talking about what you love. It goes by quick.
And we'll definitely dive into more of your touring side and more of your musical journey on my other show, Talking with Andrew and Chris, later on in the week. So
I'm looking forward to that. That should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, man, it's going to be a blast, dude. My co-host is also my bandmate, so hopefully we can really dig deep into the music on that one. But Dom, we also have a little show we like to do. Would you like to tell people who may have stumbled upon this one some information about it before we get out of here?
Yes, indeed, people. We are the Talking TV podcast. That's myself, that's Chris, and that's Jeff right there. People, we had our first official celebrity guest on today. This was a tremendous episode. Thank you once again, Jeff, for being here. I could not have. This episode went so much better than I could have possibly ever hoped for. But people, we are on YouTube at Talking TV. You can see the little logo in the corner there somewhere. That's right. That's right there. It's a little neon. It's a pretty cool design there. Talking TV, no G, on YouTube. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and any place else that you can listen to audio-only podcasts. We put out content every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on the YouTube channel. So once again, that's Talking TV on YouTube. Please leave us a subscribe if you would. We would greatly appreciate it. And we're also on social media, Facebook and Instagram. Same thing, at Talking TV, no G. So people, once again, thank you for being here. Thanks to Jeff for being here. Again, this episode could not have gone any better, even if I tried. Like I could, Jeff, we could talk to you and pick your brain for like another 2 hours if we wanted to. But Chris, as you know, we always leave the people here with something. So can I do my thing?
Yeah, and before you do that, Dom, I just want to say thanks to all the listeners, and Jeff, also, the door's always open, so anytime you have something to promote, any music that's coming out that you want to talk about, or any acting gigs when the world gets a little back to normal, door's always open, man. So
what he's trying to say is, please come back to our podcast. Please.
I'd love to.
Is his coy way of saying that.
Well,
no, you guys are a lot of fun to talk to too.
Oh,
that's what makes it great, is that, you can't have a conversation one way. So it's not
exactly need
Likewise,
that
man.
two beads, that two-way streak.
Well, Jeff, stay safe out there in Los Angeles. And Dom, I believe you have a message pre-prepared for the people here today. Am I correct?
Only one. Well, from the words of myself, watch more fucking movies, TV, and listen to some more fucking music the old school way. We'll catch you later, people.